Hello and welcome back. It's great to have you with us again for Wander into Wellbeing, focusing on really good basic habits that we can employ around self-care at this time. Really pleased to be part of the whole timetable that Team Bath have been putting together around stay in and stay well. My name is Aurea Fellows. I'm an occupational psychologist and also a nutritional therapist. And joining me as usual is my colleague Keith Goddard, also a psychologist, both occupational and sports and exercise. Together we are Reason to Be, and we're all about helping people to thrive wherever they are, and also to dare to dream and supporting them through their well-being in order to do that. The focus of our session today is all about our mental well-being. So I'm going to hand straight over to Keith, who is going to give us some top tips in terms of what we can do to support ourselves in this territory.
Thanks, Aurea. So what we're going to do is just spend a little bit of time to talk about the power of our brain and some techniques that will help us hopefully to increase our mental well-being. We know our brain's a very powerful machine, a very complex machine, but sometimes it does its own thing. And sometimes we have what's called racing mind, where our mind just goes into overdrive, thinking about many things. Some of those are emotionally driven, some of them are just because they're very different, some of them are because they're new. So we know our brain goes into overdrive when we come across new situations or challenging situations, because what it's trying to do is to make sense of those. And current situation would be very typical, where our brain takes over and thinks about loads of different things without us asking to it. So we have thousands of thoughts every hour, a lot of which we don't ask our brain to focus on, so they're unrequested. Quite often our brain's in problem-solving mode, and it's trying to solve a number of different problems simultaneously. So a lot of us are home educating our children, so we're teachers, trying to work in the same space as our partner. Some people will be short on cash, some people will be challenged by the environment. So our brain's trying to work all of these things out simultaneously and make sense of them without us putting any conscious effort into that. And sometimes our brain will feel like scrambled egg or wool wrapped up in a number of different colours. And it's trying to make sense of those individual strands and use a few techniques. So I think one of the things we talk about is trying to choose one thought or one strand of thought to focus on. And keep focused on that. And it's easy for me to say that sat here, but I know that's very challenging, but part of it's a skill and it's a practice to keep on focusing on the thing you want to focus on and the thing that you want to be in the moment with. So it's making an active choice around what you want to think about and what you want to focus on. I think the other thing to say as well is we need to be kind on ourselves. There's a thing called compassionate mind. So a lot of our thoughts aren't necessarily about objects, facts, figures, but they're about judgments. And that's about judgments we place on ourselves as well as judgments we place on others. So sometimes we're quite critical of ourselves, sometimes that links to our confidence, sometimes we're anxious about things, but sometimes we're just too critical. And these thoughts, again, are just random. We don't tell ourselves to be critical, but some of it is about being kind to ourselves and challenging those negative thoughts or those critical thoughts and focusing on more positive thoughts. And again, we can choose which one or which type we want to focus on. I think one of the things that we know helps with our thinking and taking control of our mental environment, I guess, is our breathing. So please use your breathing, your belly breathing, your diaphragmatic breathing to help calm your mind and slow your mind down. I think one of the things I'm quite passionate about when I'm working with people is to help people to declutter. Not necessarily the house, possibly could help you with that, but to declutter the mental environment. So as I said, our brain is just full of thousands of different things. Thoughts, planning, organisation, what we're going to have with our tea, and all this is just going on in the background. So one of the things really is just trying to help our brain. And for me, that's a little bit about tidying and housekeeping around it. So sometimes we need a deep clean to try and declutter and get rid of all of the debris of thoughts. Sometimes it's about occasional desk clear. So we all know psychologically that if you clear your desk, you feel way better. And that is true of your mind as well. So daily desk cleans in your head are useful, and you can do that to the end of the day. I think the other thing to think about in terms of helping your brain is short-term versus long-term memory. So one of the things we know is if we haven't parked something in our head, our short-term memory will keep on recycling it until it finds a home. So one of the things that we use and we talk about is inking it, don't thinking it. So on a regular basis, if you're having a bit of a spaghetti moment, is just dump your thoughts down, and that can be on a list, mind map, a piece of paper. And equally, at the end of the day, is trying to actually dump all of those thoughts out your head, so to clean your brain. And again, inking it, don't think it. So have a daily journal that you jump into at the end of the day will be really good. One of the things that I've noticed about working with people around the mental health space and the mental well-being space is that people tend to have an argument with the thoughts. They tend to grapple with them. And this inner dialogue goes on. From received wisdom, what we say is don't grapple with your thoughts, just notice that they're there. And within our thoughts, sometimes we have quite rigid thoughts that we have a battle with. And what we try and get people to do is be a little bit more flexible around their thinking. So what we're going to do is do a few very specific techniques around trying to help you with mental tiredness, helping with your thoughts. So I'm going to hand over to Aurea to talk about one of those techniques.
So the technique that I'm going to talk about is all around distraction. So we can have times, as Keith mentioned, when we have really unhelpful thoughts that get in our way, or they might just be thoughts that are very helpful, but they're not helpful right now because we're trying to focus on something else. So at those times, it's a good idea to distract ourselves from that train of thought that's not really in the right place or helping us in that moment. And there are a number of different ways that we can do this, and we can use, again, all of our senses to help us, depending on what works for you. You might find that some of these techniques resonate more than others. So there are some very physical things that we can do to change our train of thought. So one of them is, for example, like literally, you can see here on my wrist, we can literally snap ourselves out of it by having something that causes us to pay attention to something else physically that snaps our mind away from the train of thought and away from that unhelpful position. We could also move. We can either change physical environment as a way of signaling to our brain that we also need to change our thoughts, or engaging in physical activity for a few minutes can be another way to signal to our brain that we're going to do something different now and we're going to move away from that previous way of thinking. And as Keith touched on earlier, breathing is another way that we can just be much more focused in the present. We can take our mind away from where it is and get it focused right now on something else internal. And 3 to 6 really big belly breaths, like we've touched on in relation to emotional well-being, can help to just refocus the mind and bring it back to where you want it to be at that point in time. Other senses might also work for you. So some people find that listening to a particular song helps to change a train of thought. Looking at a particular image, something that triggers a different set of thoughts, perhaps a place or a memory that's very powerful and poignant, can be helpful for other individuals. And we can also potentially use some keywords or phrases to jog ourselves out of our current frame of thinking and back on track in terms of where we want to be. One of the things that really works for me when I find myself in a position where I'm procrastinating, so I've got a train of thought going on about the task and potentially how difficult it might be, how tricky it might be, the problems I might encounter as I go through it. And one of the things I find really helpful at that time is I steal from Nike and I use their "just do it" as a little phrase just to remind me that actually I need not to be thinking about it. I just need to take some action, because I know once I take action, I'll actually be able to focus better and I will lose all the broad train of thought about the other things attached to the task. So there's a number of different ways that we can use this technique of distraction. But Keith's now going to tell us about a different set of techniques, which is around distancing.
Thanks very much, Aurea. So it's a good description of distracting or blocking techniques, and which are particularly good for being in the moment things. And we'll talk a little bit about distancing yourself. And distancing is being more in the moment with something and just allowing the other thoughts to drift away. You gently moving the other thoughts away, which is slightly different to the distracting it that Aurea's talked around. I guess one of the things for me is the whole thing about being in the moment with something you want to be in the moment. And so therefore not letting other thoughts crowd a particular moment is really important. And as Aurea said, using different senses is really important. And I think one of the things that I'm really passionate about is trying to help people to be multisensory about being in the moment with something and distancing themselves from those unhelpful thoughts. So one of the things is developing things like playlists. So a series of different types of genres of music that helps you be in the moment with that music. And then actually having some imagery that goes along with that, some very evocative, emotive imagery that means something to you, and you can connect it to a particular song. It doesn't only have to be emotive. So I'm a big fan of music videos. So on an evening when I want to relax, getting ready for bed, I'll play 5, 6, 7 just music videos, my favorite videos, where I like the video, it arouses a certain type of feeling, and I like the music as well. And those give me a level of familiarity as well. So my brain recognizes both the song and the video, and puts me into a certain place where I can be with myself and with the thoughts that I want to be. Again, I think sometimes using touch, we've touched on this before, so having something that's familiar, so it can be rings, watches, that you can connect to a particular type of music, a particular video, really helps just distance yourself from any unwanted thoughts. A lot of you will have heard of mindfulness, and mindfulness is a really good technique to help distance yourself from where you don't want to be and where you want to be. In essence, mindfulness is about being in the moment with what you choose to be. And that can be watching videos, listening to music, multisensory. But also it's a little bit about when you go for your walk, your cycle, your run, actually being in the moment with that activity, which naturally distances yourself from the thoughts that you don't want or are unhelpful. And it allows you to enjoy your experience. So one of the powerful things about mindfulness is about the enjoyment bit, the rejuvenating bit, but also remember it allows you to just move other thoughts away. So I think one of the things to think about in summary with this is engage with as many senses simultaneously as you can, which really helps that distancing, and bring your mind together with those senses as well. So it's what you're trying to do is enhance the power of your mind. So a little bit on the power of your mind. We use a technique called switching your brain. Again, you probably are familiar with left brain, right brain. And the different aspects and different functionality of the brain. So there's a few things within this that I'll talk about. One is just the different hemispheres, and you can look on the internet of what they are. But in essence, our left brain is quite logical. It works in numbers, it works in fact, language written and spoken. It's very objective, so that's our left hemisphere. Our right hemisphere is more visual, particularly on 3D shapes. Music and art are controlled by right hemisphere. Intuition is right hemisphere. Creative, that sits there as well. But also emotion sits there as well. So our hemispheres have different functionalities. I think one of the things to say is to think about two things. One is exercising both your hemispheres, because whilst one person might be left brain dominant and one right brain dominant, actually all of us use both of them. It's just a neurological preference. So part of it during your day is to make sure you're actually occupying time and tasks with different hemispheres, and recognizing where you are on certain things in the day. So part of our 45-15 is what have you been doing for the last 45 minutes. If it's very written numbers based, one of the ways is to activate your right hemisphere, because you've been 45 minutes of left hemisphere dominant. So it's trying to let your brain relax and to recharge yourself by doing something completely different. Some really good activities are actually doing tasks which require both. So tasks that are written but also have a more conceptual basis, a high level basis. If you're drawing in pictures, write words next to them as well. If you're talking in facts, think about the emotional component. So on a particular task is trying to engage both. But also, like I said, there's this switching element to be able to actually exercise both parts of your hemisphere. I think one of the beauties of our brain, it can do as it's told. As we said earlier, sometimes it doesn't. But one of the things at the moment we talk a lot about is controlling the controllables. So what we're trying to do with brain activity is just do what you can with certain tools and techniques. And I think part of that, these things, like everything, is a skill. It's taking time. One of the things I would say as well, and I've already mentioned, is in your recharge period, so your 45 minutes to 15 minutes, is think about where your brain is, try and do something different with it, and also help it relax as well. So those are some top tips around our mental well-being, and particularly around racing mind and also helping. So remember, mental well-being is one aspect of our well-being, but it's only one aspect. If we're mentally well, then that'll help in other areas. And remember, well-being is a symbiotic system. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you for listening, and hope to join you again soon. And for today, that's it from us.